Well, we're in the heart of Mercury retrograde, and guess what? Solar and lunar eclipse. And today we're going to dive into the mysteries of the universe and beyond. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and today we're charting the stars and decoding the cosmos with two powerhouse astrologers, Lisa Pesnichak and Sara Beckner. Get ready because we're talking all things Mercury retrograde, what it really means, why your tech might be glitching, and how it affects your relationships, communication, and even your car keys. And that's not all. We're exploring the profound influence of solar and lunar eclipses, those cosmic events that shake us up, shift our energy, and realign our paths. So whether you're an astrology newbie or a seasoned stargazer, this episode is your guide to navigating the celestial chaos with insight, humor, and maybe a little magic. Again, I'm Tony Sweet, The Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios, astrologers Lisa Pesnichak and Sara Beckner. Okay, Sara and Lisa, thank you so much for being here. And first of all, Beckner I can get. Lisa, your name is a little tougher. How do you pronounce your last name, just so make sure I got it right?
It's Pesnichak.
What is that? What is that background?
It is Slovakian. It used to be Pesnichak, and my grandfather changed it. Apparently it means female poet in Slovakian.
Ooh, fancy.
Ooh, I never knew that, Lisa.
Yeah.
See, we learned something here at Truth Be Told. My grandfather was Ruzicka. He was also Bohemian or Czech, and yeah, so that same area. So they changed it to Rose because that's what it means, little rose in Czech. So
Nice.
Well, thank you both for being here. I know it was kind of last minute, and at the beginning of the week, there was so much going on, just craziness and people miscommunicating and all this stuff. And I was like, it just feels like it's Mercury retrograde. I look it up and I'm like, no wonder. It is Mercury retrograde. And then I have a sister show, Truth Be Told Transformation, and she goes, hey, did you know I think it's lunar and solar eclipse? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that sounds intense. I don't really know what that means. I know what Mercury means, but I didn't know what the solar and lunar eclipse adds on to the Mercury. So let's start there. Let's go. Mercury has begun. You said we're in the middle of it now. So let's dive in and say, how does Mercury and these eclipses amplify each other through the astrology?
I'll just jump in real quick.
Go for it.
And then Sara, you throw in wherever you want to. But this Mercury retrograde so we have 3 Mercury retrogrades a year. So we have a lot and we also have 2 eclipse seasons a year, which includes both a lunar and a solar eclipse. So those are pretty common occurrences as far as our human experience goes. But this one is really powerful because not only do we have Mercury retrograde, but Venus is also retrograding alongside and simultaneously with Mercury. And it's all taking place in the same part of the zodiac as the eclipses are. So there's a lot of powerful energy between Pisces and Aries, like the end of Pisces, the beginning of Aries. So it's just a really powerful, concentrated punch of Mercury retrograde and everything else. So,
I think for non-astrologers, it's worth, Tony, if you want to pull up the chart just to get a visual, because I think the visual
You want the Virgo
really
or the Aries?
do you want the
What's that?
Which
Virgo
one?
or Aries?
Aries is fine.
Perfect. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
I mean, more just so you can see, look at that cluster of activity over there that's all taking place on this hinge between Pisces and Aries. And I think this is one of the most interesting places in the zodiac because they're so strongly oppositional in a way. I mean, Pisces is really about the formless. It's about the mystery and surrender. It's about questions, not answers. And then we have Aries, which is much more like primal and instinctive and direct. And so we're in this time right now, and where a lot is taking place around those themes of what do we do with the formless? How do we bring expression to it? How do we assert our will and our agenda and push it out into the world while holding on to our ideals and our vision for the future? And so there's just a lot, and this is reflected in the eclipse season as well, which is taking place between Pisces and Virgo. So it's that same kind of theme of there's that aspect of self that really wants to take control, that wants control of the details, that wants to get down in the weeds, and then the part of us that's really connected to something greater and trying to understand this mystery. And that can feel overwhelming. It can feel a little confusing. It can feel a little nebulous. And so all of these retrogrades are sort of emphasizing all of that.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've heard the term before as energetic storm. And being from Kansas, growing up in very stormy weather, from snowstorms to thunderstorms and even tornadoes. So energetic storm, I'm thinking that there are good and bad. So, when we are in the Midwest, the storms bring rain, which means it's going to grow your crops, which, and feed the cattle. But also when a tornado hits or 70-mile-an-hour winds, it can do a lot of damage. Can we kind of break it down of what this energetic storm is good for and also what we need to watch out for? Because I hate to say bad, but because sometimes in bad, good things happen. So can we kind of break it down that way?
Well, I think part of breaking it down is actually in some ways widening the perspective to some degree, because this year, any astrologer that you'll talk to will tell you that this year is largely about change, the end of one cycle and the beginning of a new one. We have all of the modern planets, the outer planets and the nodes, all changing signs within the span of 1 year, which nearly almost never happens. And as Sara was pointing, so we have that symbology saying that there's endings and new beginnings that we are being catapulted into on a scale and a velocity that humankind just doesn't see very often. And that, in combination with what Sara was speaking to, which is symbolically Pisces in the zodiac represents the end of a cycle, and Aries represents the beginning of a next cycle. So in astrology, when you see a pattern or a symbol or a storyline being pointed towards several different ways. And this year we're seeing it over and over again, that we are breaking things down and then it's in preparation to be just thrown into something very new. And I think everybody's feeling the speed with which things are changing on every level. And I would say, just very broadly, that's both what these eclipses on their own are great beginnings and great endings. They're fated occurrences, and they tend to lift up the gravity of life and just kind of spin it in the direction that fate determines that we need to go in. And it leaves this, that's why the ancients and even modern day people just feel a little sketchy, a little unsure around eclipse time, because there is some lack of control that we have on some level around that time. Like the hand of fate kind of places its hand into our life and just points us in the direction that maybe we didn't realize we need to be going, but we do. So I would say to people living in this time and through these Mercury and Venus retrogrades, the eclipses, all of the sign changes that are taking place this year, that's just monumental. One of these sign changes would be very noticeable. All of them together is a lot.
I bet.
So I would say go into yourself, find your own agency, connect with people who you connect with and have a similar vision with. There's a lot of potential for the world around us to be crazy and distracting and moving at its own great rate of change. But we have that same agency within us, and not to get carried away with everything else happening. And kind of be my grounding into that.
I agree with you, Lisa. I think agency is a great word for that Aries archetypal energy too.
Yes.
And Neptune is such a strong player with those retrogrades approaching Neptune and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's going to be happening next year. And we're going to get a little precursor of that this summer as those planets get very close together. And symbolically, Neptune represents, it can be the dissolution of things. And it's sitting next to Saturn, which wants security and form and structure. And then we have Neptune, which is very nebulous. And so when you talk about sort of this storm, Tony, it makes me think about the potential for unconscious action, that Neptune is what is beneath the surface. It can be unconscious feeling. And then with Saturn and in the sign of Aries, it can be this kind of just direct, instinctive, there's something about Aries energy that's quite childlike in its immediacy. And so if that kind of instinct is connected to something that is formless, it makes me think that we all need to be really attuned to, in terms of our own seeking and our own meaning making and our own ways of finding faith, we need to be really conscious about how we do that and how we're taking action and moving that out into the world. It's definitely, like Lisa said, such an interesting time. A lot is changing, and all of these symbols, I guess, have the potentials. Yeah, you don't want to say good and bad, but they have potentials. I guess just like literally weather has potentials, right? There are certain things that we can do in these moments. And I think Neptune fosters some sense of turning inward and self-reflection and consciousness and sitting with the mystery. And I guess one of the challenges of that Neptune could be being sort of sensitive. And like Lisa was saying, there's a lot going on in the world at large. There's a lot of change. And we may find ourselves still in this place of being sort of sensitized to that collective zeitgeist, which can be a little unsettling. And maybe we can use this kind of Saturn Neptune to find some sense of comfort and stability, find our own ways to ground ourselves, to commit to those things that we think are meaningful in our own way.
No, that's well put. And I know, like I said, since I'm around this a lot, so I really didn't know Mercury was on until I was filling it, and then I looked it up. But is there any particular signs that are this go around that are having it harder than other signs? Because I'm a Sag, and I definitely feel it, and there's a lot of things happening, but I'm just curious to see if there's signs that are really feeling it more than others.
Well, the mutable signs and the cardinal signs. So the mutable, the last, like, probably 23 to 29 degrees of mutable signs, which is Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces are really going to feel it, and have been feeling it to some degree because Saturn and Neptune's been going back and forth in that part of the chart. So, and then cardinal signs, specifically the first 10 degrees, so 0 to 10 degrees of cardinal signs, which would be Aries, really going to feel it, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So, and that's whether you have angles or planets at those signs. So if you want to know more about your chart, Sara and I both do readings, and we can let you know like how this is really impacting you personally and give you some insight if your life is just feeling pretty crazy right now. So,
and I know that the charts are great because I've had mine done before, and they are great. And there's some things you can, when you understand your chart, you can make better decisions on, or at least how to deal with them. But when it comes to like the electronical stuff, there's not really much control you can do over that, because like if you're driving to work and your engine goes out, I mean, you have to get it towed, pay the bill, get it fixed. But if you're face to face with somebody and having like a disagreement, and I want to get into that in a little bit, that's something you can choose to go a different direction if you know your chart. So can you explain the difference maybe a little bit about things you can control and things you can't control and when it comes to a Mercury?
In a general sense, these retrogrades are not about thwarting our progress or just messing things up for ourselves. It's really more of a symbolic way to express this need to slow down, and to check ourselves and to revisit things. And with both this Venus and Mercury in retrograde, this is occurring around, not just our day-to-day function and affairs and, like you said, technology and conversation and how we're managing things in our life, but it's also happening in the realm of relationship, Venus, how we find value, how we manage what is ours. And so I would say when you encounter those places where you feel that friction and rub, on some level, welcome it. Invite it in and say, this is just asking me to slow down, to double check, to revisit, to go back. How am I showing up in this relationship? How am I showing up in this communication? It just gives us a chance to review and move forward.
Yeah. And in that vein, I almost, in the larger picture of all of these planetary shifts that are taking place, this right before Venus and Mercury stationed retrograde, we had a Mars retrograde, which was very impactful and really brought in this new administration. And there's a whole bunch, we could do a whole episode just on that as well. But I just find it really fascinating that we're being called to, at this time, on this precipice of immense change, to, as Sara said, slow down and reflect and check ourselves. How can we show up better in relationship? How can we be more grounded in the messages that we put out there? And what is our thought process like? How can we check in with our thought process and dial that in so that we're able to move forward in a more authentic way? And especially when we're watching this tsunami of change approach us, it's just really beautiful. I think it's the choreography of the astrology at this time is very very powerful to me. And I think a lot of astrologers are kind of mesmerized at the precision of the choreography of the planetary movements at this time. And I think that these retrogrades, like Sara said, they're a time to be curious. I think if anything, astrology and retrogrades can inspire curiosity around the world around us. Like, why did your car break down?
Right.
Like, of course, there's mechanical reasons to it, but also just looking at your reaction to it and how there's a domino effect in some way, even though it might not change the trajectory of your life. Once you start looking at this stuff, you start to see how interconnected everything really is.
It seems like reactivity is a big thing to keep in mind with all of this, how do we manage it when we get thrown off course? Or in dialogue with people with different opinions, or how can we curb some of that reactivity?
Well, one thing that I know I used to ask until I started interviewing people like yourself, but I know a lot of people ask me this: is it a good time to make good or is there a good or bad time to make life decisions in this retrogrades or eclipses? Is it a good time? Or should people just kind of put things on pause until after it passes? I hear this a lot.
I personally think it depends on your natal chart. If you have planets retrograde in your chart, then it can be a great time to make decisions. If you're somebody born under eclipse, it might be a great time to make decisions. I really think that our inner knowing is pretty poignant and that we need to follow that more than anything. But it never hurts to check in, and maybe there is a whirlwind of energy taking place right now. So double checking and checking in with your intuition, I think would be
go with the gut,
advice.
as they say.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I am seeing in a lot of my clients and friends and family, I'm seeing a lot of people at that precipice of some major decisions. And so I almost think that this retrograde, and even like you said, Lisa, the Mars retrograde, I think was supportive of this too, is just that it's okay to make those decisions at this time, because in many ways it's like going back and seeking some final resolution for things that have been an issue for some time. And so now with Venus and Mercury, people can take some time, go back, revisit it. Am I really living my life? Am I really pushing myself out into the world according to my values? Are these relationships healthy for me? Am I in the right place? I mean, a retrograde is a fine time to ask yourself those questions.
No, I agree. And I just recently, some people that I know that were going into business together, they signed agreements at the beginning, which nobody knew. And about a week into it, so just recently, it fell apart.
Yeah.
Because one started having, people, they didn't read this, and they didn't look at the contract, and this said this, and I'm not going to sign. So it really fell apart very quickly after months of working on it. So I was just like, wow, there's a lot going on. But that's when I started looking up. I was like, okay, let me look into this and see what's happening. So,
yeah, that's very textbook Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
Actually, my husband is a businessman, and he keeps track of the Mercury retrogrades for that very reason. Yeah.
Well, we talk about retrogrades. Mostly Mercury gets the glory most of the time. But we've mentioned Mars, we've mentioned Venus, and then we have the lunar and solar eclipses. So what is the difference? Because people are like, okay, well, if there's always a retrograde going on, what do I expect? I mean, it's like, is it every day that I'm going to have to fight a retrograde or an eclipse? So can you kind of break it down on the differences between those?
Yeah, so planets that are retrograde, they're not actually moving backwards through the sky. It's an optical illusion from Earth's perspective. Mercury retrograde we experience 3 times a year. So Mercury, we become pretty accustomed to that. Venus retrogrades about every 18 months, 2 years-ish. And Mars is about every 2.5 years, 2.5 years.
Oh.
So Mars and Venus are less common, and it's very uncommon to have them all retrograding in a big clump like this, especially the way that Mercury and Venus are currently side by side, stationing both retrograde and direct very close to the same degrees. So that's very unique to this time. So yeah, it can feel like that's happening all the time, but the Venus and the Mars are really quite unique in that they don't happen all the time. But we do, as far as eclipses go, we have eclipses come in pairs. So generally, where you get a lunar and a solar eclipse. So a lunar eclipse is a full moon with close to the nodes, and a solar eclipse is a new moon close to the nodes. And we get that twice a year. So essentially we, in general, in a normal cycle, have 4 eclipses a year.
I think it's important to mention, Tony, that because if you just take in the astrology on the internet or you're listening, it can sound kind of cataclysmic. And
right.
It's really, it's not. I mean, not everybody's going to be affected to the same degree. We generally, astrologers, don't really think a lot about the effect of an eclipse in your personal life unless you have a notable planet or something within 1 degree of that eclipse. And so even though, yes, we're experiencing these eclipses every spring and fall, and they shift signs, and they do indicate some larger trends that are occurring in terms of what we're dealing with on the collective. They don't necessarily mean something for all of us. And you can see it even in recent times with, like with the pandemic, how differently people navigated that. Some people enjoyed it. It was time to slow down and be with their families. For some people, it was devastating. And so really you have to look at the individual chart to understand the weather you're in. We can make these general statements and get a sense of what's going on. And like Lisa said, some of those bigger cycles you will see shifted in the collective, and to really understand them, you almost have to go back and look at history for the last few hundred years to really see how powerful those cycles are. But for mere mortals on the day in and day out, we sort of have to look at our chart, or, like you said, look at your sign, look at degrees, potent degrees, and what might be affecting degrees. We won't all be impacted by everything that's happening in the sky.
I was just, I'm sorry, Lisa, if you need to.
Oh, I was just agreeing.
Oh, okay.
That, yes, it all really comes down to our natal chart and how it's impacting us there.
I was just looking at a couple things that I was about big events that has happened during a Mercury retrograde, and I mean, since it's 3 times a year, there's always an opportunity for that to happen. But the sinking of the Titanic in 1912 and the Facebook outage in 2021, I mean that's just 2 examples, and I'm sure we could a list of.
Well, there's the current one with Signal. Pete Hegseth debacle.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. And what's funny for me, I didn't know it last Friday. I don't even hardly post on Facebook, and it says, "Oh, you are blocked for 180 days for not complying with something," and I'm like, I don't post. So I had to prove my video, and within the day it was back up. And just this morning it happened again, and I'm like, I haven't even posted. I'm like, I don't know what you're looking at. So I had to prove again. So I'm just waiting to get back on Facebook. It's mostly just keep up with family and friends, but for no reason. So it is kind of interesting how things like this, or maybe people that just know about Mercury, we just notice it more, that it happens during these times.
Yeah. And in a general sense, the way we prioritize information in astrology is the less often something happens, the more potent you're going to see that influence on a more global scale. And so what's really significant this year is that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, because and the changing of the signs. I mean, Neptune only changes signs every 14 years. So yeah, when you look back, there are a lot of people right now doing some really interesting research on that conjunction and looking at how it aligns with the crowning and the deaths of kings and going back, it's fascinating stuff.
It is. And I was going to ask you about, when it comes to, a lot of times I notice a lot of people passing away during Mercury retrogrades. Is that just because the energy is so high that it just kind of, I don't know, breaks the realm a little bit open more where people can pass through? I don't know. I was just curious.
I haven't noticed that personally. I would maybe maybe eclipse seasons would be more likely to open that sort of portal up. I'm not sure. Again, it comes back to the natal chart, but Mercury retrogrades tend to be more mental and physical in how we move ourselves around and like transportation and communication and that sort of thing. So, I mean, possibly I haven't looked into it that closely.
You know, I've never heard that, Tony, but now that you say it, it has me thinking that that could be conceivable for lots of reasons. You know, people being more accident prone, mistakes in care, you know, in medical care, or other sort of corroborating factors that could influence, you know, somebody at the end of their life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that would be a way to look at it. I just noticed it, but, you know, I could just be looking for things too.
We're going to have to do some research.
There you go. We'll have to have you back.
Know.
I definitely want to have you guys back to talk about, like you said, what's going on in the world. I would love to, you know, maybe give some dates and all, you know, with the administration and overseas and all kinds of different things. I would love to have you back and we can talk about that more. But currently, the people that are listening in today, and, you know, there's going to be more retrogrades, there's going to be more eclipses. How can we protect ourselves, and how can we reflect, or, you know, is there rituals that we can do? Is there any techniques, grounding techniques that we can, you know, pass on to them to really focus on, to get them through and to really make an understanding as they walk away from this retrograde and eclipses?
I mean, I think one piece of that is just, look, you know, there's some things about when you start talking astrology that really have to do with how we approach life philosophically, we humans. And I don't think the goal is necessarily to be happy or to create the perfect set of circumstances.
Right.
I mean, we're really here on this human journey to learn. And so when we encounter these obstacles, when we're feeling into something different, just being really present to that. And like Lisa said, being curious and inviting some of that into your life, just reflecting, what is it asking of me? And I do think this is a time to ask more questions than, you know, to loosen our grip, you know, because a lot of what's happening on this Pisces-Aries axis is around those issues of surrender and control. And so, you know, where can we lighten our grip? Where can we be gentle with ourselves? Where can we allow ourselves to slow down? I mean, I sort of think, Lisa and I often joke that astrology is like looking under the hood, you know, of the universe and seeing the machinations. And that gives me a lot of faith and trust that that there is some sort of intelligent orchestration of things here on Earth. And we can trust in it. So when it feels like we're in hard places or having obstacles, it's not really, it's okay to be in those places, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
What about you, Lisa?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I guess I always just come back to we were born to be here at this time. And on some level, we chose to be present for this huge shift in humanity, which this retrograde Mercury, Venus retrograde and eclipse season is all part of. And this is really a key part of the changes that are being ushered in. And in looking forward to this year, I actually, I'm doing a monthly meditation circle online. Just because I think that it's so important for each of us individually to connect with the openings that are happening for us, and instead of getting pulled into the chaos and the noise that's around us, because there's certain to be a ton of that. And I really believe that if at this time, if we can center into what our calling is and how the inspiration and the momentum, because there is so much of that this year, specifically and into next year as well, if we can tap into that on an individual and as well as a more of like a group dynamic, that's where the real important change can potentially happen, because each of us is, I believe, is very important in the way that humans evolve forward. Right. And so I guess my advice would be to slow down, which is largely what these retrogrades are pointing towards. And eclipses as well. I always clear my calendar as much as I can around eclipses. And just to take the time to listen to your inner knowing and your higher self. And I guess that would be my advice.
That's great. Well, this is great advice, and I think a lot of people are going to take this to heart and learn from it. And if they need more clarification, I'd like to let you tell people where they can find you. You know, maybe book some charts and see what they have in store for them, and how to get through this unscathed, as they say. So, Sara, where do people follow and find you?
SaraBeckner.com. All my contact information is on the website.
Perfect. And Lisa?
I'm at thedynamicselfastrology.com.
And you both
can find me there on YouTube. I have a channel as well. And Sara and I have a podcast and
that's awesome.
Instagram.
Awesome. Well, you're coming up in about 3 weeks. I'm going to be launching the 3rd annual Parapod Festival Podcast Awards. So you're going to have to submit your podcast. So it's all about the paranormal and all about people like us that love this stuff. I look like I have a halo around my... I just now noticed that. But you're in Colorado, but doesn't matter where you're at. People can find you and work with you anywhere in the world. So, but thank you so much, Sara and Lisa, for being part of Truth Be Told for the first time. And I know you're going to be back many times because now I know some amazing astrologers to go to. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Once again, Truth Be Told right here on Friday at 3 o'clock. And, of course, Monday with Truth Be Told Going Wild with Robert Hensley. And then on Wednesday with Bonnie Burkert, Truth Be Told Transformation. And I'm here every week. So the last 13 years. So don't go anywhere. Make sure you subscribe, follow, and leave comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.